Hey beautiful. Have you considered subscribing to our channel? It helps us make quality content for you. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The dust rose in waves across the wasteland as the sun dipped behind the serrated horizon of Dracos 4, leaving the sky in bruised colors of red and gunmetal gray. Raylan Voss stood at the edge of his compound, watching the world fade into shadow, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. Despite the heat trapped inside his suit from a day spent scavenging solar panels from a wrecked crawler to the west, he moved with the heavy deliberation of a man carrying too many ghosts, his spine straight. Out of muscle memory more than pride, his right knee still stiff from the orbital shrapnel he took during the Battle of Ganymede's Reach. 18 years ago, his name had meant something. Once now it was as forgotten as the base he called home. A rusting lattice of alloy and polymer, barely standing against the desert wind. He turned when the first sound came. Not the howl of wind or the static buzz of dying solar lines, but a high-pitched screech so sharp it sliced clean through the layers of audio filtration in his helmet. Not human, not machine, it came again, urgent, chaotic. He reached for his rifle on instinct, then stopped, his fingers hovering over the grip. No one came this far out. Not anymore. Not since the mines closed, and the last. Shuttle lifted off and the corporate flags were lowered. The only things that moved across this dead land were dust devils and ghosts. But this sound was neither. He walked toward it, rifle slung across his shoulder, breath low and steady his boots. Crunching on glassed sand, the sound grew louder, closer, wild, with a rhythm that struck something deep in his memory. A cry not of attack, but of desperation. The crater appeared suddenly where the ridge dipped into a natural basin, scorched black at the edges. Something had impacted recently, hard enough to shatter the crust of the desert floor. Steam still hissed from broken rock. In the center lay a container torn open along its side, like it had been mauled from within military-grade alloy. A black stripe running across it with the words Project Wyvern etched in blocky white code inside. Were bodies. Small-scaled limbs, twisted and piled in chaotic tangle, 8 creatures barely the size of hunting dogs, some locked in combat, others too, weak to lift their heads, their eyes glowing dimly with embedded tech, their wings twitching erratically. One was already dead, its side torn open from an internal rupture. 2 more were bleeding a blue-gray fluid from under their scales, and another lay curled in the corner, wheezing, each breath shallow and sharp. Raylan did not move at first, he just stared at them, memories fighting their way up from the dark corners of his mind. The briefings, the test footage, the whispered rumors of the Wyvern. For initiative, genetic experimentation, neural programming, living weapons made to dominate battlefields, without needing to be told when to kill. But these weren't weapons. Not yet. They were young, terrified fighting. Not because they were built to, but because they didn't know how else to survive. He dropped to one knee, unhooked the satchel from his belt, and opened a ration pack, tearing it into strips, holding a piece out slowly toward the nearest one. It snarled but didn't strike its nostrils. Flaring, it snatched the food from his hand and backed away. Eyes fixed on him, calculating feral. Another followed, then another. He counted 7 still breathing. He used his knife to scrape together a makeshift trough, filled it with water from his reserve, barely a liter left for himself, but he didn't care. He watched them drink, claws scraping against metal as they jostled for space, no longer attacking each other. Night fell hard and fast as it always did on Dracos, the sky turning black. In seconds, stars punching through the void like ancient eyes watching everything too far away to help. He brought what remained of the crate back to his compound, loaded the creatures into a storage bay, once meant for mining drones, now stripped bare of anything useful. He cleaned their wounds with alcohol and old gauze, every movement careful, precise. One of them tried to bite him. He let it. His armor absorbed the sting, and it stopped after that, watching him with something like understanding when the smallest one died just before dawn. Raylan buried it outside the compound under a pile of smooth stones he found near the ridge. He stood over it for a long time, staring at the freshly turned soil as if waiting for something to rise. He hadn't buried a soldier in 18 years. Not since the last of his squad went down on Titan's Ridge under fire from orbital cannons and faulty intelligence. This felt no different. The next morning he pried open the hidden panel inside the container. So fail-safe, known only to officers with level 9 clearance. The transmitter was intact. Though degraded, he rerouted power from his solar intake and activated the signal, an old code that would alert anyone still watching the frequency that project. Wyvern had been compromised or discovered. As the signal pulsed into the void, he felt something shift in the pit of his stomach. Something cold, something certain. Someone would come. He sat beside the storage bay, watching the hatchlings sleep, if sleep was the right word. Their bodies twitching in fits of neural misfires, their breath synced like soldiers in a barracks. Their scales no longer gleamed, but they still shimmered faintly in the low light. He wondered what their names would have been, what purpose they were born into, what lives they were never meant to have. Just before sunset, a new sound broke through the compound walls, a low rhythmic pulse, far too regular to be whether a craft descending quiet, nearly silent military grade. Stealth configuration. His fingers found his rifle before his mind caught up his stance, instinctual, his body already moving. He climbed to the roof and saw the shimmer of displacement field as it dropped the craft into view. Matte black with no markings, no landing lights, only the red gleam of thermal ports cooling from re-entry. He knew the design, knew it intimately from the war. From ops missions long buried in shadow files, it was a retrieval unit, not meant to negotiate or ask questions. Its crew would not care about survivors or sentient potential. They would execute protocol, neutralize witnesses, sanitize the site, and reacquire the asset. The dragons were never meant to be saved. They were meant to be owned. Raylan moved quickly, sealing the outer gate, reinforcing the bay entrance with a scavenged mining strut. He loaded his rifle, checked the charges on his backup pistol, calibrated the old motion sensors he had left half buried in the sand when he stopped believing anyone would come. Dragons stirred, sensing his tension. One of them, the boldest with a scar over its left eye, growled low, its voice deeper than expected. It rose onto its haunches. Wings half spread, the others followed. Not with fear, but readiness. He looked at them. These living questions born from forgotten science and buried ambitions. They were not monsters, not yet. They were something new, something fragile, something the world would not understand. He took one last breath, centered himself, and whispered, "Not today?" Then the compound lights went dark as the stealth ship settled into the sand, with a hiss of releasing pressure, and the silence before the storm began again. "Would you like me to continue with the next section?" The ship landed without ceremony, its black hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it, the kind of craft used in operations that never made it into records. It bore no insignia, no name, only a silent authority that spoke louder than any flag or crest. It settled on the perimeter of Raylan's compound, like a spider finding the center of its web. Raylan crouched behind a broken turbine rifle, ready, breath steady. The dragons clustered in the shadows behind him, quiet, alert. They had sensed the danger before the ship even touched down, as if their minds, still tangled in bio-coded instinct, could taste what was coming. The ramp dropped with a hiss, revealing 3 figures in full tactical armor, their suits fitted with adaptive camouflage, the kind reserved for operatives who hunted ghosts and returned with only silence. Their helmets bore the triangle pattern of Earth Military Black Site Division. Raylan had worn the same suit once in a different war with a different lie, the one in knee. Front moved like a predator. Confident, practiced his steps, too deliberate to be anyone but a commander. And when he removed his helmet, Raylan saw the past staring back at him through cold, familiar eyes. Brax Navor. Raylan did not move, did not lower. His weapon, though his heart tripped over memories of missions gone sideways, of blood on snow, and names spoken only to the dying. Brax had been his second during the campaign of the 5 moons, before the desertions, before the orders that asked. "Too much." Brax smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Raylan," he said, voice smooth as always, "didn't expect you'd be the one who tripped the Wyvern signal." Raylan said nothing. He watched the 2 soldiers behind Brax fan out, methodically sweeping. The area scanners, drawn rifles loose in their hands, the efficiency of men who had never once hesitated. Brax tilted his head, eyes scanning the shadows behind Raylan. "They still alive?" he asked, tone casual but lined with something sharp. "The hatchlings," Raylan kept his voice level. "You knew they were coming out here?" Brax shrugged. EarthGov never shut Wyvern down, not really just moved it off the books, figured the prototypes wouldn't make it past hatch phase, but if they did, we had contingencies, Raylan's grip on the rifle tightened. They're not prototypes, they're children. Brax chuckled, then ran a gloved hand through his graying hair. You always had a soft spot under all that steel. You think the committee sees them as anything but weapons waiting. To be tuned, they're unstable, barely coded. We're here to retrieve them before someone else does, or before they start burning colonies to ash. Raylan shifted slightly, weight distributed perfectly behind the turbine in case he needed to pivot. You're not retrieving anything, not while I'm breathing. Brax sighed, then gestured, and his soldiers stopped scanning and turned back toward him. Look, I'm not here to kill you, old friend, hell. I even filed you MIA instead of KIA out of respect. But you're in possession of high-risk assets, and that means I bring them in or I put them down. Behind Raylan, the dragons stirred, sensing the rising tension. The one with the scar stepped forward, lips curled, wings, twitching blue lines pulsing beneath its scales like veins of light. It let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a warning. Brax raised an eyebrow. Did you name them yet? Never mind, don't tell me, makes it harder to do the job. Raylan exhaled slowly. You were a soldier once, Brax. You. Remember what it meant to protect something even when command forgot how to value it. Brax's face hardened, the old mask slipping into place. I remember what happened when we let feelings get in the way of orders. That's how we lost Ganymedes. Lower Arc. Raylan shook his head. No, we lost it because we followed blind orders from cowards who never saw the front. Brax lifted his hand, and the soldier on the left moved forward, a scanner in his grip, glowing red and green lines, spinning as it picked up heat signatures through the walls, through the dirt. They're under you, Brax said, voice colder now. You buried them in the mine, didn't think you'd go that far to play hero. Raylan's rifle barked once, 2 shots clean and fast. The scanner dropped first, then the man behind it chest blown open before he hit the ground. The other soldier raised his weapon, but Raylan was already moving, rolling left over the turbine, returning fire. The bullet struck the man's shoulder, forcing him down, but not out. The dragons scattered down into the shaft as if guided by some shared instinct, their bodies glowing faintly in the deep. Raylan followed, covering them with bursts of suppressive fire before vanishing into the entrance he'd reinforced only hours before. Brax swore, crouching beside his wounded man, then activated a beacon on his wrist. Send the drone, we've got movement into the shaft. Probable concealment lower sectors, we flush them out. Inside the tunnels, Raylan moved. Through pitch black, guided only by memory and the occasional flicker of light from the dragons ahead. They moved quickly, agile in a way that spoke of biological adaptation, wings folding neatly as they ducked and twisted through the tight stone. Corridors. He sealed the door behind him, metal slamming shut as a charge clicked into place, a makeshift barrier that would only buy him minutes. He dropped into the first chamber once used for mineral sorting, now dark and echoing with the hum of forgotten systems. He checked the dragon's one, injured, a burn mark across its back, but breathing, another, limping slightly, favoring its front leg. He touched each one, murmuring quietly until they stilled again. They were learning to trust him. Learning. He would not hurt them. Further down, past 2 broken lifts and a collapsed tunnel, Raylan found what he had only glimpsed during earlier scavenging, a sealed chamber, behind a rusted bulkhead marked with the old Wyvern sigil, a half circle around a stylized wing. He forced the lock open using a bypass cable and stepped inside. The air, thick with dust and the chemical scent of age screens, flickered weakly as backup power trickled through the ancient grid, and in the center of the room, a cradle. A birthing tank long since drained. Surrounded by shattered glass and dried fluid stains, he accessed the terminal, wiped it clean, and loaded the drive he'd salvaged earlier from the crate. Files began to populate one by one, revealing the truth phase. 3 Project. Wyvern's final protocol, not to create weapons, but to end war. The dragons were designed as empathic regulators, capable of syncing with human emotion, redirecting violent intent through shared neural fields. But the project had failed, because the programming required genuine connection, something EarthGov leadership deemed too unpredictable to deploy. They couldn't control what they couldn't understand, so they labeled it a failure, sealed the facility, and let the prototypes die or disappear. Raylan leaned back against the console, the truth burning through him hotter than plasma. They hadn't just made these creatures to fight. They had made them to feel. Behind him the dragons had gathered, watching him quietly, as if they too sensed the truth written in every line of code, every faded schematic. Their bodies were reacting subtly, eyes glowing in unison, breaths sinking as if something in the old chamber resonated with what they were always meant to become. Then, a rumble shook the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The sealed door behind them buckled slightly. Brax was coming. Raylan loaded his rifle, checked the pistol strapped to his thigh, and whispered to the dragons without looking back. "If we survive this, I'll get you off this rock, I swear." From the shadows, one of them stepped forward, Kale, the bold one. Wings folding tight to its sides, it pressed its snout briefly to Raylan's shoulder, then turned toward the door as the sound of boots and steel filled the tunnel. Raylan raised his weapon. "Let's finish this. Would you like me to continue with Section 3? The first blast cracked the seal on the bulkhead, sending a ripple through the chamber like a heartbeat made of thunder. Raylan crouched low, rifle-aimed, breath locked into rhythm with the ticking of the backup generator overhead. He counted the steps echoing down the passage, 6 sets, no more, no less. Brax had brought reinforcements, likely from a dropship, cloaked in orbit precision units, men trained to breach, clean, eliminate faster than questions could form. The dragons did not cower. They formed a loose circle around him, their glowing eyes fixed on the entrance, their breathing slow and deliberate as if preparing for something more than survival, something older than fear. The next explosion blew the bulkhead inward, metal curling. Like paper under heat and pressure, 3 soldiers swept in through the smoke visors lit by targeting arrays. Rifles already raised, Raylan opened fire, his shots precise, 2 down before they hit the floor. The third, clipped in the leg, fell hard, tried to crawl away. Raylan spared him. He pulled back into the shadows, motioned the dragons to scatter through the maintenance shafts that led off the main chamber. They moved fast, slipping into the dark, like threads of living shadow, their scales brushing. Stone with soft clicks like dry leaves in the wind. Only Kale remained crouched beside Raylan, its eyes never leaving the doorway. Then Brax stepped through his armor, gleaming faintly under the emergency lights. His rifle lowered, his expression unreadable. Behind the polarized visor, he stopped 10 paces from Raylan and removed his helmet slowly, carefully, like a priest unmasking before a ritual. "I gave you a chance," he said, his voice tired but not weak. "You knew this wouldn't end in compromise." Raylan kept his own weapon-trained center mass. "You knew they were sentient. You knew they weren't weapons, and you came anyway." Brax looked around the chamber at the broken cradles, the flickering data feeds, the projections of genetic maps still lingering in the air like ghosts. They weren't supposed to evolve past command imprinting. No one expected them to bond. No one wanted them to. Raylan's voice cut through the hum of dying power. "But they did, and now you're trying to erase that like it never happened." Brax exhaled slow, as if letting go of something heavy. "They're unstable, Ray. We lost control before they even left the vats. Half the test group went feral. We had to burn Site 6 to the bedrock. You think I enjoyed that? You think I sleep knowing what we did?" Raylan took a step forward. "Then stop doing it. Stop following orders that bury the truth under excuses." Brax lifted his weapon slightly. "I can't stop this. I can only make it cleaner. Fewer bodies, fewer headlines, EarthGov. Wants the assets or they want silence, either way, I'm not the one calling the shots anymore." From the far shaft, a scream cut through the stone. Not human, not dragon. A noise sharp with pain and static. Kyle jerked its head toward the sound, then bolted before Raylan could stop it. Wings scraping the ceiling as it vanished into the dark. Raylan swore under his breath and followed, leaving Brax behind, confusion flickering across the commander's face for the first time in years. The corridor opened into another chamber, smaller, ringed with old observation pods and shattered glass. On the floor at the center, one of the younger dragons lay bleeding, thin whines escaping its throat. It had been caught by a drone, sleek black with its talons. Sunk into soft flesh, the drone's red lens pulsed with threat detection as it prepared to strike again. Raylan didn't aim. He just moved, a single shot. Took the drone through its sensor array, sending it spinning backward in a shower of sparks. Kyle leapt across the chamber, claws extended, landing hard on the broken machine, ripping it apart with fury. that was terrifying and beautiful all at once. The wounded hatchling whimpered weakly. Raylan dropped beside it, hands moving fast gauze pressure. Sealant, burn spray, whatever he had left. Kale stood guard, wings arched, mouth open in a low hiss that vibrated the glass footsteps behind them. Brax again, slower this time, rifle slung weaponless, watching them. "That one's done," he said quietly. "Pains. Too deep, it won't last an hour." Raylan ignored him, kept working, even though he knew Brax was right. The hatchling's breath was fading, its glow already dulling. Then it reached out with one claw barely touching Kale's side. A soft flicker of light passing between them, a connection brief but undeniable. Kale's body jolted slightly, then stilled, its eyes wide, then narrowed as if something had transferred from one to the other. The wounded one exhaled once and went still. Raylan bowed. His head. Brax stepped forward, slowly stopping just short of the body. "They're networked, aren't they? Emotional echo fields like Wyvern. Phase 3 theorized but never proved." Raylan looked up, his face lined with pain and fury. "You just watched it die and all you care about is theory." Brax didn't answer at first. Then he knelt slowly beside the broken drone, his hand running over the shattered sensor. "I care more than you think. I was at the original briefing. Ray, I believed in it more than anyone, that we could end conflict with empathy. I fought for this project. I fought to keep it alive, and when they pulled the plug, I was the one who helped smuggle the embryos off-site, thinking I'd find a place where it could work." Raylan stared at him. "You were the leak." Brax nodded once. "I was the leak, and the fix they found out sent me back to burn what I had tried to save, and now I'm here trying to finish the job, because at least then it means something." Raylan stood slowly, his rifle lowered but his eyes never wavering. "It doesn't mean anything if you destroy what's left of hope." Brax looked down at Kyle, who was still standing watch over the dead sibling, its body trembling slightly from the aftershock of the transfer. "You said you'd get them off this rock. Where would you take them? No colony will accept them, not after what happened on Pharos Station. And even if they did, EarthGov would hunt them across every sector until there's nothing left but bones and shadows." Raylan turned toward the old uplink tower, visible through a crack in the chamber ceiling. "There's a relay outpost 5 clicks west. Old smuggler comm line before the mines shut down. I bounce a signal off it. Ping the Terran fringe. Someone will come, someone who doesn't answer to EarthGov. Someone who remembers what it's like to protect the innocent." Brax rose slowly, weapon still down. "And if they don't," Raylan's voice was iron, "then I buy them time until someone does." They stood there for a moment, two men who had once bled for the same flag, now bleeding in different ways, each carrying too much of the past, each facing a future neither fully understood. Then Kale stepped forward, its wings folding neatly, eyes locked on Raylan. It moved past him toward the tunnel and waited. Raylan followed. Brax did not stop him, did not call for backup, did not raise his weapon. He only whispered, "Good luck, old friend." Raylan paused at the edge of the tunnel and said without turning, "They're not monsters, Brax. They're the only thing that still feels like redemption." Then he vanished into the dark, Kale beside him, the others waiting ahead, and somewhere above the stars began to shift. Shall I continue with the final section? The wind howled across the plateau, tearing through the broken metal bones of the old mining relay station. Raylan crouched beneath the exposed array, wiring pulled free from rusted conduits, his hands a blur as he spliced the last fiber link into the smuggler's terminal. He had rigged the comms with every dirty trick he remembered from his old ops, sending the signal through dead satellites, bounce relays, and ghost protocols. If it worked, someone would hear him, someone who still believed. Kyle stood nearby, wings half-spread, eyes scanning the ridge beyond the station, where dusk was swallowing the sky. The others waited in the cavern below, silent, alert, knowing instinctively this was the final stand. Raylan's pulse beat like war drums, low and steady, his fingers stained with oil and blood. He pressed the ignition key. The terminal flickered, once sputtered, then came to life with a soft harmonic tone, signal live, encrypted burst beam locked. He uploaded the data, all of it, the Wyvern files, the research logs, the death records, and a single plea, not for war, not for vengeance, but for sanctuary, for the children of a failed peace. The comm hissed a faint response-coded affirmation, 3 pings spaced precisely. Then silence, a promise, without a voice. He shut the panel and rose slowly, joints stiff from strain. The sun was gone now, and the plateau glowed under the twin moons. A shadow moved along the ridge, sharp and fast. Then another, then more. Brax had not let him go alone. He had called the rest in the moment. Raylan vanished. He must have activated every asset within reach. The first shot cracked the stone beside his foot, a warning. Raylan rolled to cover behind a collapsed antenna. Kale let out a cry, not of fear, but fury. The sound rattled the sky. The others answered from below, surging up the slope, their bodies glowing veins of light chasing through scale and claw as they emerged into the night. The firefight began like thunder. Earth. Gov soldiers spilled over the edge of the ridge, rifles up, formations tight. They had numbers, armor drones, air support. But Raylan had something they could never train for. He had belief. He had something worth dying for. Kale moved like lightning wings, slicing the air, breath glowing. Blewett struck a drone mid-air, tearing its casing apart with a shriek that sent sparks trailing into the dark. 2 soldiers fell to Raylan's fire, their visors shattering under precise bursts. Another went down under a blast of heat, as one of the dragons released a breath weapon that melted steel like wax, but they were too many and the ridge too open. Raylan motioned them toward the relay tower, drawing fire to himself, his body a blur of motion, muscle memory, and desperation. He ducked and rolled and returned fire every bullet, a prayer every step closer to the comms tower, a vow. Then Brax appeared, rising from cover like a ghost, his armor scorched, his rifle gone. He carried only a sidearm and a flare stick, the red light casting, his face in crimson shadow ray. He shouted above the roar, "The evac team is 2 minutes out. Get them to the plateau north face. There's a flat ridge they can land on." Raylan didn't stop moving. "You're helping now." Brax nodded once as if answering. "To no one but himself. I owe you more than a grave. I owe them a chance." A drone swept down between them. Kyle intercepted it, mid-dive, wings folding back as it drove the machine into the dirt and tore it apart. The dragon hissed once, then turned and led the others toward the north ridge. Raylan followed, covering their retreat bullets ricocheting off stone as he moved, Brax beside him. Silent, resolute. At the ridge, the evac ship broke the cloud cover, silent and black, its lights off its engines. Lower stealth freighter fitted with modified landing skids and no markings. It touched down hard but stable. The rear ramp dropped, and a crewman stepped out shouting over the wind. 4 minutes tops, get them aboard and get clear. Raylan motioned. The dragons forward, they hesitated only a moment, then moved one by one. Kale went last, eyes fixed on Raylan, its body glowing brighter now than ever before. Something pulsed in the space between them. Not a command, not control, but a bond forged in. Fire and choice. Raylan turned to Brax. "You coming?" Brax looked back down the ridge where the last wave of EarthGov soldiers regrouped, setting charges, loading launchers. "I cover the exit. You get them out." Raylan reached out, hand clasping Brax's shoulder. "One last time, don't waste it." Brax gave a crooked smile, the kind he used to wear in barracks before the war turned them all into weapons. "I'm already making peace with the devils I created." Raylan turned and ran up the ramp, Kyle behind him, the T. Hatch slammed shut, the engines flared. The ship lifted just as the first missile screamed past its hull below. Brax stood alone, drawing every eye, every gun, his flare held high, until the blast swallowed the ridge and the sky turned white. In the ships, hold the dragons huddled together. Not in fear, but in understanding, their eyes locked on Raylan, who knelt among them, one hand resting against Kale's chest, feeling the thrum of life, the echo of something bigger than war or duty. The pilot's voice came through the intercom. "Signal received, safe corridor confirmed, we're clear." Raylan leaned back against the bulkhead, eyes closed, breath shaking. But steady. He had not saved a world, he had not won a war, but he had done something more rare, something more dangerous. He had chosen mercy. He had given hope a second breath, and for the first time in years, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. Would you like a full compiled version of all 4 sections in a single file or text? Block.